Hey guys, subscribe for daily content, and if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks! What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the SOG Tac XR. Yeah, there's a little ting there. I gotta be honest, I don't know if they're all like that, but this one's got it, so some people like that, some people don't. This is a knife that is available right now. I will link it right down below. The SOG XR lock series of knives are pretty good. I've had a pretty good experience with them. Some are better than others, for sure, and we're going to talk about that. Thank you so much to the gentleman who loaned this to me for review. That'll be Jared. I really appreciate that, Jared. This will go back to him when I'm done. Thanks so much to my patrons who are supporting me. Link for Patreon down below. And please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. Let's go ahead and get a measurement of this guy. This is definitely a full-size knife, definitely larger than the Terminus. We're coming in at about 8 inches overall. Blade length is coming in just shy of 3.5 inches, probably 3.4. Your cutting edge, I believe, is also... No, you know what? It's about 3.25. Yeah. Let's go ahead and do just a couple size comparisons up against the Ontario Rat Model 1. And the Ontario Rat Model 2. So you can see here, it is a full-size knife, but it's, you know, closer to the Rat 1. How about we do the Spyderco Para 3? Definitely a bit larger than the Spyderco Para 3. Last but not least, let's do the Benchmade Bug Out. Absolutely larger than the Benchmade Bug Out. How is the action of this guy? Generally speaking, the XR lock, which is, it's the axis lock with little switches, it's pretty good. I mean, once you get it to release, the action is super smooth, and it's a nice solid lockup. This one in particular has some lock stick, and I gotta be honest with you guys, no matter who it is, Benchmade, SOG, Hogue, you know, Gonzo, whoever else does these, there's lots of companies doing these axis style locks now that, you know, the patent ended a while back. Sometimes you're gonna get lock stick, sometimes you're not. Sometimes it will be severe. In this case, this is one of the, you know, this one's a bit sticky. Right? You can feel it. Eventually it goes away. Sometimes you will have zero lock stick upon purchasing the thing and it will develop lock stick. Eventually it will go away. That bar is working its way into the tang, right? And once it kind of smooths that spot out a little bit, it will continue to lock up solid and you'll have either zero or substantially less lock stick, right? But this one has a little bit. So just be wary of that. Let's go ahead and do carry profile thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. We are looking at a knife that is, it looks like it's going to be thicker than it is, but truthfully, it's really, if it is thicker than the Para 3, it's not by much. You can see there, I'm trying to calibrate for the chamfered edges. Yeah, not really, right? Length and height up against the PM2 and Para 3. This might be where some people notice it in the pocket a little more. Lengthwise, you're looking at approaching the PM2, definitely larger than the Para 3. As far as your height goes, there are areas that are almost as tall, right, including the flipper tab, but still, I mean, if you're used to carrying these knives, this one's not going to be a whole lot different until we get to weight. We have full, pretty thick steel liners here. You can see, I mean, how much material we're looking at. They have been skeletonized a little bit, and then we're looking at reasonably thick G10 scales. It's also a full-size knife. So the weight is coming in. I'm gonna guess this weighs 4.75 to 5 ounces. Nope, more than that, 5.19 ounces. So ratios, definitely off. And I'll tell you this, the knife is definitely butt heavy. So balance point, it's not terribly off, but it is back here. We're going to talk more about that. So when you pick it up, it feels heavy. It feels bulky, right? It's definitely going to be bigger and bulkier than a PM2 or a Para 3 for sure. Let's go ahead and measure blade stock thickness. Thing just tipped over. I think the bag spacer is, yeah, I should have known that that wasn't going to work. Blade stock thickness, 145, 150 thousandths? No, I'm completely and totally wrong. It's about 125,000. It's different. Knives just look weird. How come you don't know that before you start the review? I don't know. I kind of like to guess, right? It's kind of I like to just experience the knife and then we'll take the official measurements, right? And then you just do with that information what you will as it goes. Let's go ahead and do a hardware check. I'll get all my tools as per usual. My tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel. I don't know why I pulled out a T7. Let's do T8. Nope. I forgot. Some of these SOGs have T6 pivots. Whoever is responsible for making these decisions at SOG, guys, a T6 pivot is wrong. That's your opinion. It's wrong. Come on. T6 pivot. No. This should be at least T8. This is the worst thing. Listen, if you strip one of these handle scale screws, right? I mean, it sucks, but, you know, the knife can continue to function, you know, reasonably well. I mean, it might cause an issue down the road. The worst screw, the worst fastener to strip would be the pivot. We got two sides to this, and they're both T6. SOG, at least T8, preferably T10. A T10 pivot, it's the way to go. Those are easy adjustments. You guys know what it feels like when you stick the, look at it, it's not a super deep, it's not like it's a deep head. If you're gonna go T6, it's gotta be a deep head. You guys know that terrible, that heart-sinking feeling when you go to adjust and it goes bloop, and you go to like unscrew it and the thing rounds out and pushes itself backwards, and you're just like, oh, I just totally stripped the pivot. That's what's gonna happen. Not T6, T8, preferably T10 for pivots, right? The other screws here are T6, which also sucks. But, you know, I can choke down some T6 handle screws if we have a, you know, a pivot. Like, that's the thing that you're gonna mess with the most. You know, whether it be for maintenance or just like centering adjustment, or just you're trying to get the action the way that you want it, or whatever, right? That's the one you're going to be adjusting the most. And we got two sides to it, and they're both T6, so that sucks. I don't like that. But what are you going to do? Hopefully they make, you know, appropriate changes to future models. Based on what I think. Let's see here. Is that it? Is that everything? I think so. Let's go ahead and talk about this. So if you're looking at this and going, gosh, the blade sure looks small for the amount of handle. Yeah, that's the first thing I noticed too. And so I thought, is it going to be like that one SOG where you close it and the tip is like nowhere near, like there's all this wasted space at the end? Not really. Maybe a little bit, but there's not a lot. It's just the height of the blade and then the taper off to the point, and like you have this kind of fairly delicate blade, and then you have this really meaty, aggressive handle. And I'll tell you, functionally, it's fine. And, you know, I'm not somebody who really cares all that much about blade to handle ratio. As a massive fan of the Spyderco Para 3, which has a ridiculous blade to handle ratio, it doesn't bother me, but the height of the Para 3 blade balances out with the handle a little bit. The whole blade just looks kind of funny on this guy. I don't know why. It's not that big of a deal. It's like I said, you know, in terms of, you know, utility, the blade shape is great. You're quite a ways from the initial cutting edge, right? Because of this area here. We're going to talk about that. But it's fine. Ergonomics on this knife are pretty good. The lock-in is pretty good. They're not getting super crazy about, like, you definitely have to... You can kind of adjust for comfort a little bit. There's not too much in here that's really forcing you into one specific spot. And those areas are pretty docile. This is not an aggressive peak or anything like that. There's not any insane jimping, right? We definitely have seen some SOG knives where it's just the entire thing is like a dirt field that's lined with barbed wire. That's what a lot of SOG knives, and it just, I mean, you know, to be fair, a lot of knives that I really like, you know, some in my personal collection are kind of like that, but obviously we don't need that. We have good ergonomic lines here. We have jimping where it's appropriate. Kind of like these little areas right here where it's like if you rock over to one side, there's a little bit of texturing here to help lock you in, but it's not super aggressive. The jimping on the spine is the most aggressive, but it's still not crazy, and it extends out to a point where it's reasonable and functional, so I appreciate that. The pocket clip is weird, and we've talked about this clip before and the positioning of it and the idea behind it, and I don't completely and totally understand it, but you know, it's there. I'm realizing now that this last little area here is most likely a screw hole, and this was, you know, this wasn't sent by a company or a retailer. This was sent by, you know, a viewer, somebody. This is their personal knife. This looks like a screw is missing back here, or maybe a couple of screws. That would be my guess. It's pretty typical for SOG to use 3 screws on each side and then have a lanyard hole, which the positioning of all of this is just atrocious, but we will talk about that. If you're looking at this hole and going, why is there a second smaller lanyard hole? I'm gonna guess it's for 2 additional screws, and those 2 additional screws are just not present. But if that's not the case, then I have absolutely no idea what that hole is for. It just looks like it's sunk there to accept the head of a fastener. So anyways, the texturing on the G10 is also very good. This is the type of knife that is comfortable to use without gloves, but if you use gloves, it's just gonna add to the benefit. The flipper tab is actually shaped really well for flipping it. I appreciate that. I mean, it'll catch your finger, but not in an uncomfortable way. I mean, you can light switch it. You can also push button it. The thumb studs are a little bit pointy, just a bit aggressive there. I'm kind of wondering, did we need them? This is one of those knives that should have been just a flipper or just a thumb stud opener. If you did not do the flipper, we would have an area right here that probably, you know, even if it wasn't knocked down, you could probably choke up just a little bit. As it sits right here, it's almost like they're suggesting like, hey, put your finger here. This doesn't feel super safe to me, right? I think I would rather not have the flipper tab there and be choking up here if we did, you know, a thumb stud version. But if that was the case, the thumb studs would definitely need to be knocked down a bit, a little bit shorter, a little bit fatter. I always use the Rat as an example of a perfect thumb stud, right? These tall, pointy things are definitely not comfortable to interact with. So if you buy this knife, you will likely be flipping it most of the time, and it works really well. These sort of Axis style, it's not a traditional detent, right? So it doesn't have that really hard and really, you know, distinct buildup before it flips. It's almost going to release faster than you might think, but it does good, right? I mean, there's really nothing to complain about here. It flips reliably. There is a mounting position. I mean, this is an ambidextrous lock, so fortunately they were smart and put a mounting position for the pocket clip for left-handed carry. So lefties, you can enjoy this the same way that a righty would. So that's good. The blade is Cryo D2, which, you know, cryo treatment is supposed to increase marginally toughness and edge retention, apparently. Now, how measurable is that? I mean, it's probably something that is measurable in a test. Like if we do this knife exactly this knife, right? You got one D2 blade and one Cryo D2 blade, then they probably could prove like, yeah, the Cryo's gonna outperform the, you know, the non-Cryo one, but just by a little bit. From my understanding, the Cryo is not a massive difference. So at one point, you know, I was like, oh, it's really cool. They did the Cryo thing. But I mean, this is the knife world. We're all about those incremental bits of potential performance, even if they don't translate to anything tangible, right? Like, or at least we can't really measure them in day-to-day use. So are you going to notice a difference day to day? Not likely. Not likely, right? Assuming they heat treated this correctly, I think D2 needs to be at about that 61, 62 range, I think, to really be, you know, where it's supposed to be in terms of the balance of its composition and where you want to get the edge retention right. Edge retention's not the end all be all, but as far as the balance of the composition goes, yeah. The blade shape, pretty good. We have a little swedge here. And then, you know, as far as like the grind is flat from this area up here and there's a little swedge, but as far as like, you know, what it tapers down to, it's a relatively thin edge. I mean, this is a good day-to-day blade. It's not anything, you know, the look of this knife, like to a newcomer, like there's a, you know, SOG is attractive to, I'm not saying only new people, but these types of knives that are like really black and give off the super tactical vibe, right? It gives off the impression that they have something to offer that is above and beyond the typical pocket knife. And the truth is, not really. There's not really anything overly tactical about this knife, right? Versus the Ritter Hogue, right? I move this off camera, right? So, I mean, a lot of, if you're really new, you might look at the SOG and go, well, that's clearly for somebody who's taken their occupation a little bit more seriously, right? It's a little bit more tactical, a little bit more shadowy, right? Can't put my finger on it, but I'm going to guess that it's meant for serious work, while the Ritter Hogue is just meant for casual work. No, that's complete and total nonsense. The Ritter Hogue is literally the same idea. It's just a good ergonomic handle with an ambidextrous locking system. It literally locks up the same way. And then we have utilitarian blade shapes. They're different and made out of different materials, right? The Ritter Hogue arguably is going to be, you know, the better day-to-day, given that it has better corrosion resistance and edge retention. It really just depends on what you're doing with your knife. It's a lot more expensive, right? But if you're not familiar with this, it gives off the hyper-tactical military, you know, police vibe, but it's not really, you know. It's just kind of it's day-to-day, and it gives off that, it's got that tactical look if you like that aesthetic. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But I don't want anybody to be fooled into thinking that you're buying something ultra-professional versus, you know, non-professional. It's kind of like there's some knives in Benchmade's black class where you're like, what? Why is this shadow level 9 Ninja code red versus the blue class? Like, why? It doesn't make any sense, right? It's marketing. So I'm not saying that they market it that way. I'm just saying it's just kind of, it can be funny sometimes. It can be confusing sometimes. Anyways, this has a lot of stuff on it. SOG is Studies and Observations Group, which I don't know at what point were they like, yeah, you know what? Just putting SOG on the blade is not enough. Let's spell it out. Let's spell it out and then put SOG on there anyway. Studies and Observations Group, SOG Tac XR, Cryo D2. My God, that's insane. There's way too... that paragraph looks so weird on this knife. It just... I mean, I'm kind of surprised that they didn't, like, you know, add another paragraph explaining, you know, the process that they went through in designing this thing. It's just like a whole, like the entire blade is the story behind this design. It's just too much information. Just put SOG and then put Cryo D2 on the other side. They don't have to put, we don't need all of this, right? It's insane. The coating, I'm honestly not sure about the coating. It might be the equivalent to Cerakote. I think SOG does a pretty good coating, but I don't know if it's DLC, if it's Cerakote, or if it's PVD. It's probably something like Cerakote, right? But that would be my guess. Edge is nice and sharp, and like I said, relatively thin. It's got a nice puncture tip. Don't pry with your knife. Take it from somebody who has done it and broken the tip off of his knives before. But yeah, don't do that, and you should be okay. The backspacer looks good. This is G10 and then steel, and then we have more G10 for the backspacer. We do have a lanyard hole, and for some reason, both the lanyard hole and this final screw hole, which the knife clearly doesn't need, are taking priority over the position of the pocket clip, which is funny because its design is one that allows it to carry deeper than where it mounts. This is usually the type of clip that you see near the top, right? Knives do not have to be deep carried to be good. Pocket clips do not have to be deep carried to be good. But this could have carried a bit deeper and been better, and it probably just less. Well, no. Here's the thing. Let me retract that. Deeper would not have made this better because this is still a reasonable, you know. What I don't like is a shallow carry. So a knife like sticking like this much out of your pocket would be ridiculous, right? But it gives you a tactical advantage. No, that's ridiculous. I mean, fine if that's what you like, but for the most part, I'm like, I don't really care. I'm not planning on getting attacked by ninjas today. So I really just want the thing to be, you know, pretty deep in my pocket and just kind of stay there. I don't want it like flopping out, like ready to be used as some sort of, you know, defensive or offensive catalyst against, you know, the ninja clans of the alley behind my local supermarket or wherever people plan to be attacked in their fantasies. Yeah, no, I just don't need it that shallow. Why? Why did we go, you know, well, this is where the pocket clip's going to be because we really need that lanyard hole to be right there. Even though, you know, just put it in the backspacer. Get it out of the way. Like, So you can, that way you've got more freedom to do different things with the pocket clip, because the pocket clip design itself is just mediocre at best. And then we also have the screw hole up here that we definitely need, right? No. The clip is a nice length. I appreciate that the pocket clip is short. I don't think pocket clips really need to be that much longer. Like the bug out clip is the same way. It's nice. I don't like it when they go straight and then they dip and then they come over. Like the pocket, the thinnest of pocket seams will not be able to conveniently slip underneath that bill. It should have dropped down and then come up, right? This is a little bit better, a little bit. Ideally, it's like this. It's just a, you know, taper down and then come up so that it rises. So when you push it into those thick pocket seams, it doesn't go, it goes whoop, and it pushes, it ramps itself up and over, right? We're already working with a texture right here. So pushing it in with one hand, you're gonna have to fight it a little bit, which is a bit, that's kind of poopy. We have a stop pin that's located right here. Sorry, it's kind of, the camera doesn't like to focus when we're looking at a knife that's completely and totally blacked out. There's no shouldering, but I don't think it needs it. These XR locks seem to lock up about as solid as any of the other Axis style locks that I have ever experienced. Totally solid. This definitely is a knife that you can take out and use hard. And no, I don't mean using it as a screw. That's not hard. Like, abusing the knife is not hard use. I mean taking it out and putting a lot of force into your cuts. And sometimes when you're cutting into dense material and that friction causes the blade to almost get stuck and you're going to kind of pull it. You want a strong lock for stuff like that so that the thing is not disengaging as you work backwards against this material that might have your blade caught during a heavy cut, right? Wood, rubber, really dense, you know, if you're talking about cardboard that's got, it's just really dense cardboard, or maybe you're cutting into cardboard and styrofoam at the same time. You know what I'm talking about, right? It's nice to have a secure lock so the thing doesn't close on your finger. Obviously, the flipper tab's going to help with that, but the lock is completely and totally solid, and I appreciate that. No pivot lash, action is reasonably smooth. And then we have a little bit of off centering. I think it's kind of a mushy, you know, centering. This is fairly typical for SOG, but then again, it's fairly typical for a lot of knives that use this lock setup. It can be adjusted. I've got a video on how to center the blade. This has also been used, so I don't want to judge it too much, right? I've had many SOGs come to me brand new that are perfectly centered, right? So it can be a dice roll. But if your blade is off center, that's not a reason to send it back, right? Same with lock stick. It's not a reason to send it back. The centering will not fix itself. It's usually something you have to fix. It's not that hard. Lock stick is something that will fix itself generally. So, what do they want for this? They want, is it $78 or $79? The SOG Terminus XR is something like $55. Well, that's because it's smaller metal complex. It's smaller. See, smaller knives generally are, they cost less because they are smaller. No, that's not true. Person who I'm arguing with in my head. I don't know why this knife is $75 to $80. That doesn't make sense to me. Honestly, I would rather, like, this is a full-size knife. Like, somebody looking at the Terminus XR going, that's cool, but I want something bigger. Like, well, here it is, right? The Tac. But I'd rather just have the Terminus as an 8 to 8 1/4 inch knife with a 3 1/2 inch blade. And then if you want to charge me a little bit more for it, then fine, right? But there's not like, well, it's bigger, so we want $20 to $25 more. Well, no, that doesn't make sense, right? I think they should just make a bigger Terminus. I think they should make a Terminus XR XL. Oh, how funny of me to say those things. Yeah, this is just a weird knife to me. Balance is off. The handle feels really bulky. The blade feels really tiny and not delicate, but just oddly placed. Like it's like the wrong blade is on this knife. That's what it feels like, right? It's got a little bit of stick. And this whole pocket clip thing with them needs to get figured out, where they are like, it's a deep carry clip, but we mount it super low, so it's weird, right? But okay, the truth is that people who pick this up and use it, you'll probably really like it. I mean, it's going to be a really capable tool, you are quite a ways, right? If you're going to cut straight down, you're quite a ways from that cutting edge. Not really that big of a deal. It's a good tool. It's ergonomic. The pocket clip will function. The deployment mechanisms will function the way that they are supposed to, and it will lock out solid and do what it is supposed to do. But there are countless designs out there that are just better. Like this. There are SOG makes knives in their own line that are just better than this, right? I mean, there's just so much competition in this general area. Even knives that are slightly less convenient to open and close, the design, I just think there's just lots of stuff out there that's better. And these knives are made in China, right? So it's not like, well, you're buying this particular model, not all SOGs, but this particular model is made in China. There are plenty of designs out there. I mean, if you're, saying, well, not totally ambidextrous, well, yeah, in some cases, sure. It might be a lockback or something like that, but I mean, there are even knives like Civivi will oftentimes use the button lock, which if you're a lefty, you would operate it with your index finger instead of your thumb. So it's not perfectly even in terms of like the definition of ambidextrous. But we're talking about a knife that will function just as well, right, for substantially less, that's using exactly the same materials. This knife, if it came in at, $55 to $60, I would have been a lot more impressed with it, right? Judging it on the budget knife scale, this feels like it should be a budget knife, and by my definition, which is 75 or less, it is not a budget knife. It's just a really awkward knife. It's okay. It's not something I'm going to say, everybody's got to rush out and buy this, right? It's all right. If you buy it, if you like it, and you're like, yeah, I can check down the price, you'll probably like it, right? It's a good work knife. Not anything spectacular. And that's really all I can say about it. I don't know why this review lasted 26 minutes, but it did. Sometimes that happens, right? Thanks so much to the gentleman who loaned this to me. This will be headed back to you shortly. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.